Hi there. In this tutorial, we'll be learning about downside risk. Specifically, we'll be talking about semi-deviation, lower partial standard deviation, and value at risk as alternatives to standard deviation, which is a commonly used standard measure of risk. However, standard deviation focuses on both upside risk and downside risk, whereas these three alternatives primarily focus on downside risk only. Before getting started, just to let you know, we give you free access to this spreadsheet. You can find the relevant information in the video description, so feel free to check that out. Okay, let's get started. Let me first give you some description on the data that we have. Basically, we have monthly returns of the S&P 500 index. So I have here already some descriptive statistics about these returns. So the average monthly return over this period was 0.73%. The lowest return was almost minus 22%. And for those who are curious, this was the October 1987 crash. And the largest monthly return was 16.30%. We've got two more useful statistics here, skewness and kurtosis. Skewness captures the symmetry of a distribution. So a symmetric distribution has a skewness of 0, whereas in this case, there's negative skewness. And normally, a normal distribution would have an excess kurtosis of 0, whereas this distribution has an excess kurtosis of 1.61, which means that it has fat tails. So these two statistics are important because standard deviation works well as a measure of risk when skewness is 0 and when excess kurtosis is 0 as well. So as we can see, this is not the case, and this is quite common. So that's why we also consider these alternative measures of risk. We have a detailed tutorial on skewness and kurtosis and descriptive statistics in general. So we have left the information on that in the video description as well. So feel free to check that out too. Okay, now let's get started with our measures of risk. So first, I will compute standard deviation, and then we will move on to the remaining measures. So this will be more instructive for you to understand the differences. So to compute standard deviation, there are two possible ways. So I'll first show you the sort of the long method and then the quicker method. But honestly, they are both quick. So all you need to do is basically compute the squared differences from the mean for each month, right? So we start with January 70. So take the deviation from the mean. And I'm going to fix this cell because for going down, it will always be H2. So I fix that using F4. So this is just the difference. I need to take the squared difference, okay, to the power 2, and then just extend this all the way to the bottom, okay? So standard deviation basically is going to be the average squared deviation. So basically it will be from this to C661. I think this should be the last cell that I have. We can double check that. So this will give you actually the variance, 0.20. Let's double check we have the right fine. Yes, 661. So this is the variance, and to find standard deviation, you need to take the square root. Okay. Standard deviation is the square root of variance. And in this case, that is 4.42%. Okay. So the faster method to do that is just use an Excel inbuilt function. So for example, you will find two functions here, stdev.p or stdev.s. So you might wonder which one to use. When your sample is large, it doesn't really matter. You'll get pretty much the same result. stdev.s is more appropriate because we are working with a sample of returns. So when you are forecasting, this gives an unbiased estimator. The whole difference is that in the population case, you divide by n. in this case, you divide by n-1. So when sample is large, that n versus n-1 doesn't make any practical difference. So again, let's make sure that we get the same figure, 661, standard deviation. Oops, of course, I'm selecting the wrong cells. I need to select the returns, not the squared deviations. And here we are, the same figure as before, 4.42%. Okay, so this is the volatility of our returns. I'm going to go back a bit. I'm going to use actually the original formulation where we use the squared deviations from the mean. Okay, so this is fine. So this is our general measure of risk. But this works well when skewness is 0 and excess kurtosis is 0 as well. When it is not, this could either underestimate or overestimate risk. And furthermore, in many cases, investors are more worried about downside risk. Because if you think about risk, when things go better than expected, that's fine. So that's the upside risk, which we don't mind. But what particularly worries us is when things go worse than expected. So that's why we need these alternative measures of risk. So if you think about the standard deviation, the last thing to say about that is that it basically it gives us an idea about the dispersion of the distribution. Okay, so I've got a nice, so I'm going to zoom out a bit, a nice histogram here of the monthly returns. So this 4.42% basically captures the dispersion of these returns. Now, let's move on to our first measure of downside risk, which is semi-deviation. Okay, so with semi-deviation, what we have is that, again, we are going to look at the deviations from the mean, but we will set it to 0 when that deviation is positive. So which means that we are going to ignore positive deviations and we'll only focus on negative deviation. So we take each cell, each monthly return. Again, we subtract the average return, okay? And we can again fix this cell because it's going to be the same always, okay? So we take this, and then we are going to square this like we did before, okay? So you can see that this is identical because this is basically a negative deviation, but when I pull this down, you will see that there are lots of zeros as well. So we are not taking into account positive deviations. We are only taking into account negative deviations from the mean. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to use, again, this range, okay? So let me actually fix this as well. Okay. So I'm going to pull this down, but instead of column C, which is squared deviations, both positive and negative, I'm going to focus only on the negative ones. So let's see what we get. So it is 3.29%. So this is semi-deviation. Okay. So this is the volatility focusing only on the deviations from below the mean. Okay, so this is the average return or the mean return. And with semi-deviation, I'm focusing on deviations from below the mean. All right, so our next measure is lower partial standard deviation, which is very similar to semi-deviation. So the only difference is that when we say semi-deviation, we are primarily focusing on this average return as our benchmark. So I'll put here the formula for lower partial standard deviation. So basically, in the case of semi-deviation, so this R star is the average return, right? But with LPSD, typically you can set it to something else. So in this case, we will set it to 0. So we will basically focus on only deviations below 0, okay, as our measure of downside risk. Sometimes practitioners set this equal to the risk-free rate as well, which is possible. So this is basically your minimum acceptable return, okay? So here, the target return is going to be set equal to 0. So we'll basically pretty much have the same thing as before. So we are, the only difference is that we are going to replace this H2 with our target return. So again, it's going to be minimum 0 because we don't want the positive deviations. So we'll look at the deviations from our target return. So I'm going to now fix this cell, okay? And as before, we'll take the square of these and we will extend this all the way down. So I can now also move this formula. And instead of this column D, I'm going to select column E. Okay. So lower partial standard deviation is 2.93%. Okay. So if your target return is 0%. So you can change this, for example, if the risk-free rate, the relevant risk-free rate is 0.5%, you can make 0.5%. As you can see, this will update accordingly. But we will stick to a target return of 0 in this case. So this is yet another measure of downside risk. So again, if you look at this graph, so if the mean return is somewhere here, basically we are looking at the volatility on the left-hand side, okay? And finally, value at risk. So this is, again, another quite popular metric used by practitioners. So the idea here is that you rank your returns from lowest to highest, which is sort of what we do in this histogram. And you think about the probability. So if you think about the entire area under this histogram, it adds up to 1. Okay, so at least historically, this has been the distribution. This has been this is what we have been observing over the past 55 years. Now, value at risk basically asks the following question. So it focuses on a particular quantile of the distribution, okay, or a percentile. You can also think of it as a percentile. So in this case, we'll start with 5%. So we'll look at value at risk for the 5th percentile. So I want to basically find sort of a cutoff point where 95% of the observations will lie above it and 5% of the observations will lie below it. So what this basically means is that on a typical month in the future, what is the 5% probability that I will, or what will be the return that I will observe with 5% probability, and I'm sort of finding the minimum point, so the return will be either that or worse, okay? So let me show you what it is, and then it will be actually easier to interpret. So we are going to use this percentile function. You can either use the one excluding the cutoff point or including it. So I'm going to use the one that includes that, but again, it won't make a huge difference, especially if you have a large function. So you need to select your array. So basically, you need to go back to our return series. So I think it was 661, if I'm not mistaken. And then you need to select your K. So this is sort of your cutoff point, okay? Then just close the parentheses, and you get this as minus 6.95%. So let's say minus 7%. So what this means is that basically 95% of the observations lie above minus 7%, and 5% of the observations lie below minus 7%. So there's sort of, if the way to interpret this in a forward-looking way is that there's 5% probability that I will experience a return of minus 7% or worse on a monthly basis if I invest in S&P 500. You can change this as well, so you can look at 10%, right? And think intuitively whether this should be more negative or less negative if I make it 10%. So if I'm making it 10%, essentially with probability 10%, I'll get the return figure, and it will be either that or worse. So intuitively, this should be a less negative figure because I'm going to basically move right towards in terms of the cutoff point. and that figure is going to be minus 4.76%. So with 10% probability in a future month, if basically history repeats itself, right? If there's no systematic change in the market returns in the future, with 10% probability, I might experience a return of minus 4.76% or worse. Okay, so that would be the interpretation of value at risk. All right, everyone, that's all I wanted to cover in this tutorial. So I hope you have enjoyed it. We have lots of other useful tutorials on our channel as well. Feel free to have a look, and all the best.